Okay, welcome to Psych 230, Social Psychology. Today we're starting chapter 2. We're going to be talking about the person and the situation. So things about the person that impact social psychology, and then of course the situation, and of course the interaction between the two. So here's our outline. Things about the person first, then the situation, things about the situation, and then the interaction. We're not really going to get to, I think, the situation or interaction today, but we're going to talk about things about the person. So here are things about the person that we need to know about that impact social psychology. So this first set of chapters is just kind of setting things up. We're going over some things that are going to help us understand the topics that we'll cover down the road. So things about the person. So motivation, right? We're talking about things that drive us. That's very important. That's one thing we're going to cover, right? Another thing is knowledge. Knowledge is our view of the world, right? What we believe to be true. Okay. And then we're also going to talk about feelings. And in this class, feelings refers to attitudes, emotions, and moods. Usually we think of feelings as just being emotions and moods, but attitudes are also included here because attitudes imply that we feel a certain way about something. And we'll talk about the self, which is also knowledge, but it's knowledge about the self. So we deal with that separately. And when we get to the part about the self, we'll be done. Okay, so we'll leave the part about the self and other things for the next lecture. So let's get started. So what is motivation? Motivation is actually hard to define, but it's a force that actually drives us towards a desired outcome. It's something that we know because we're moving in a certain direction or we want something, but otherwise it's hard to define. Motivation means you want to do something. But if you want to do something, it means you're motivated. So it's kind of circular reasoning there. Now, motivation includes, motives. It includes goals and sub-goals. It can be broken down into those different things. Motives are things that are broad, things that have to do with, like social survival, something needed for social survival. So motives are broad. So one motive might, for instance, be to gain status, right? All of us want some sort of status. We want people to recognize us basically, and look at us and give us attention, things like that. Another broad motive is we want to affiliate, and that means that we want to be with other people. We want to have friends. We want a romantic partner. We want families, right? Co-workers or acquaintances, things like that. We need and want to be with other people. That's the affiliation motive. And we also have a motive to defend ourselves, right? If someone attacks us, we'll defend ourselves, maybe aggressively or by shouting or whatever it is, or pushing off, but that's also a motive. There are other motives, but we're talking about things that are broad, that are important for our social survival in some way, okay? But we can, we could also talk about goals. Motivation also implies that there are goals, okay? Goals are more specific. So a goal is something, it's a desired outcome, sometimes one wishes to achieve, right? It does relate to motives, but it's something more specific, right? Like maybe we have a goal of getting a good grade or getting a job, getting a romantic partner, or maybe, getting a big house or something like that, right? That's a goal. And then there are sub-goals. If we're smart, we will break things down into sub-goals, into even more specific goals, things that are smaller, more manageable. Because if you just have the goal, right, of like, let's say I want to get a good grade, right? If you don't break it down into sub-goals, it'll be harder for you to get that good grade. You need to break it down into sub-goals and tell yourself, well, in order to get that good grade, I have to attend class. I have to take notes. I have to study. I have to ask help. Ask for help when I need it, right? And those will be sub-goals. You can do those little things, right? You can go to class. You can take notes. You can ask for help. Do all those things. And if you do those things, it's more likely to lead to, you're more likely to achieve the goal of getting a good grade. Or it might seem hard to just get a good grade, just by thinking about the grade. Or you have to write a paper, right? It seems like something that's so hard. How am I going to do that? It just seems so hard, right? Break it up into sub-goals. You're going to search for stuff. You're going to read stuff. You're going to summarize things, right? You're going to cite things, reference things, and you break it up into these sub-goals. And if you follow the little goals, you'll take care of the larger goal, right? People sometimes have these broad goals, and that really doesn't get them anywhere. Some people just say, oh, I want to be rich, right? I'm going to be rich when I grow up. but they have no plan. They have no sub-goals that they've established, that they've identified. They won't get there. And even if you do have sub-goals, you still might not get there. If being rich and successful was easy, everyone would be rich and successful. It's not, especially being rich. Okay, it's not hard. I mean, it's not easy, I should say. If it was, then everybody would be rich. It's not the case. You can put it together into a pyramid like this, so you can see you have a broad motive, like, like gain status. You want to gain status. In order for you to gain that status, well, you have to get a well-paying, highly respected job. That would be a goal, right? In order to reach that goal, right, you have to have the sub-goal of earning high grades, right, in school, right? And if you want to earn high grades, then you could break it down into further sub-goals, right? You have to attend class, take notes, study for exams, and you can see how all these things are related. And they all have to do with motivation. And there's something there, right? It says, use a figure like the one above to list one of your motives, related goals, and sub-goals, right? You can do this for basically anything that you're motivated to achieve, right? Usually we would do this in class face-to-face, and we diagram this on the board, but we're doing this via Zoom, so we'll just skip it and assume that you guys can do that. It's not that hard, actually. So that's motivation, okay? Now, motivation, that's a way to define motivation, right? Helps us understand it. But motivation also involves attention, and it could also involve what's called automaticity, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, right? So motivation involves attention. When you want something, when you're motivated for something, what you'll find is that you'll be paying attention to certain things. You'll be looking in a certain direction. Like when you like someone, you want to be with someone, you'll find yourself looking at them frequently, okay? When you want to do a good job on that paper, you'll find your attention going to certain places, to doing searches, right? Toward reading and writing and revising, right? How do we know if you're motivated for something? Well, it basically draws your attention. And we can use an example, right? Attention is basically when you consciously focus on aspects of the environment, right? Or something about yourself, okay? You'll consciously focus on something. And the thing about attention is at the beginning, it seems to, when you're first starting to do something, it seems to require a lot of attention. Like if your goal is to learn how to drive well, okay? At the beginning, that requires a lot of attention, right? Where to put your hands on the wheel, where to put your feet, the shifter, right? Looking at the speedometer. It seems like you have to attend to a lot of different things. But as you basically get more and more practice with that, and you do that more and more, it becomes somewhat automatic, okay? Automaticity is basically when behavior or cognition operate with little attention. When you get good at driving, it doesn't take a lot of attention. Your feet know what to do. Your hands know what to do. And your eyes know where to look. And it's almost effortless, okay? And you're not even really paying that much attention. It says, what else requires much attention first and then less later? Well, I'm recording this, so I can't really have discussion now. So I won't really take your responses. But I mean, there's lots of different things, whether you're operating machinery or writing a paper, right? It requires a lot of attention at the beginning. And as you get better at it, it requires less attention. Even teaching this class, any class, when I first started, it's like I was just focused on the information. I couldn't think of anything else. Now I've been doing it for a while. It's easier. It requires less attention. I can think of things in the spur of the moment, examples, and share things about my life and still stay on track. It gets easier, it's not that hard anymore. And that's what happens with everything, with practice, as long as you get good at it. Now, there are some things that are so hard, you may not get good at them, okay? So they may not become automatic, but if you get good at something, it becomes automatic. Now, motivation is related to something called willpower, and they're not the same thing. Motivation means you want to do something, right? And willpower is more about how much energy you say you could have, to do something. It's related. There's an experiment that was done that tells us about the relationship between motivation and willpower. So participants came into this study, and there were basically, they had two bowls there. One bowl had radishes, which is, if you've eaten radishes, they can be a little bit spicy, right? And another bowl had cookies, okay? Okay, it's just it's a lot easier to eat cookies than it is to eat radishes, just so you know. Okay, but one group of people, right? They were together. One group of people were told that your job is to eat those radishes. Eat those radishes right there. Do not eat the cookies. You're supposed to ignore those. Do not eat those. The other group was told to do something much easier. You can eat those cookies, right? Eat those cookies. Do not eat the radishes. Ignore those radishes. Don't touch the radishes. And there was a third group that was not exposed to cookies or radishes. That's what we call a no information control group. Okay. All these groups of people, they were all then asked to solve a difficult puzzle. Group one had to eat radishes, ignore cookies, and then do a puzzle. Group two had to eat cookies, ignore the radishes, and then do the puzzle. Group three just went right to the puzzle. Okay. And this is what the results showed. Okay. If you graph the results, they look like this. Those that had to eat radishes, the white bar there, those that were told to eat radishes and ignore the cookies, they basically worked on the puzzle about an average of 8 minutes and 21 seconds before they gave up. It was a very difficult puzzle, and it's meant to be difficult, and eventually they all give up. Okay, those that were told to eat radishes and ignore the cookies, they basically spent the fewest amount of time on the puzzle, 8 minutes, 21 seconds on average. Those that were told to eat cookies and ignore the radishes, they worked on the puzzle longer. They tried it for 18 minutes and 54 seconds on average. And those that were not exposed to any information, they worked the longest, 25 minutes and 52 seconds. What does this say? What this tells you is that basically willpower is limited. You see, those that were told to eat radishes and ignore the cookies had to use up their willpower in order to ignore those cookies, in order to basically not eat those cookies. It takes willpower to stop yourself from doing that. So they didn't have that much willpower left when it came to solving that difficult puzzle. They gave up faster. Those that were told to eat the cookies, well, that's easy. They're not using much willpower at all. And so they worked longer on the puzzle. They had more willpower left for the puzzle. In the control group, they also had a lot of willpower left. So participants used up their willpower to resist the cookies, right? They had less willpower left over for the difficult puzzles. Difficult puzzles, yes. Think of it this way, right? When you are on break, you're not going to school, let's say you're not working. When you're on break, it is easier for you to exercise, right? You have more energy, you have more time. So if you want to exercise, get out there, it's easier for you to do so. It's also easier for you to follow a healthy diet. You have more time. You're not working that hard, you're not studying. But guess what happens when the semester starts and all of a sudden you're going to school, right? And you're studying, you're writing those papers, or maybe even you're working at the same time. Now what happens to your diet? How hard is it to maintain a healthy diet then? Right? You tend to snack more and eat more fast food. Exercise, oh, forget about it. You don't have the energy. You don't have the time. Even if you do have the time, you don't want to do it. You're worn out already from work and from school, even if you're not working physically. Your willpower has been used up and you're less likely to exercise. That's what happens. That's a lesson there about willpower. It is limited. You only have so much. And if you use it up for some things, there'll be less available for other things. If I were you, I would use my willpower first for school, because school is important. And then the other things come after that. Work, exercise, whatever it is. School is more important, because if you do well in school, then you get that degree and you have a good job, and then you have a better job later on that pays you more money, and you have more time and more willpower for other things. But if you use up your willpower by, let's say, doing other things out there, let's say working, or maybe you're out there partying, having fun, using up your energy in that way, let's say, that doesn't require as much willpower, but it still takes some willpower, then there's less left over for school. And then you pay less attention, you don't try as hard, and then you're more likely to fail and basically waste your time and continue to try again and again if you don't give up. Use your willpower for what matters most first. And then whatever's left, okay, that's for those other things that are not as important. I understand that work may be the most important, and it may be that you need the willpower for that first, then school, then other things, okay? But in my opinion, school is more important. You can be poor and live on the street or whatever it is, be homeless, you can still go to school. And you can be successful in the future if you try hard. And we've had plenty of success stories like that, by the way. People have been homeless and stuff like that. Use their willpower, try hard in school, graduate, right? Move on, go to Harvard, become very successful, even though they were homeless. So use your willpower for what matters first. Let's talk now about knowledge. That was motivation. Knowledge basically is our view of the world. It's what we see, what we notice, what we believe, okay? Knowledge involves schemas. It also involves exemplars. A schema is basically general information about episodes, events, or individuals. So a schema is an episode, an event, or an individual, okay? General information about those things, okay? General information. Here's an example. A schema is just information, general information. So leader, dedicated, preacher, that kind of stuff. That is a schema. That is general information, okay? About a specific individual. That's a schema. Now, the exemplar is the knowledge of the specific episode, event, or individual. The exemplar, so the exemplar is the individual who exemplifies that. In this case, is MLK, right? Martin Luther King. That's the exemplar, and the schema is the information. Okay? So the point is that our brain or our mind organizes information in this way, right? We have things that fall under the category of exemplars, okay? Or people, individuals basically, or maybe events or episodes, specific things, right? That are categories. And then the general information that falls within those categories, that's the schema. So we do this in class usually on the board, but now we're doing this via Zoom. But, one thing you can do is think of the phrase great athlete and write 10 things that come to mind when you think of the phrase. So you think of great athlete and you might think, oh, well, great athlete. Okay. You might think, for instance, motivated, right? You might, another thing that might come to mind is, championships, right? Or maybe, well, it's hard to do it like when you don't do it right in front of the board. Okay. Actually, I usually ask you guys for these things, but because it's hard for me to lecture and then think of these things at the same time. Okay. Because I'm trying to think about that and lecture at the same time. But okay. So motivated, champion. Okay. Leader, strong, physically fit. Okay, I might think of like the Olympics might come to mind, or, LeBron James might come to mind, Kobe Bryant, those kind of things. When you make that list, what you'll find is the things that come to mind, the things you think of, some of those things are schemas, like motivated, athletic, physically fit, leader, those are schemas. And then the specific things, like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, the Olympics, that's an event, those are exemplars. So the brain organizes information this way. That's our knowledge, our view of the world. Let's talk about feelings. So knowledge is organized in that way. Let's talk about feelings. Feelings in this class refers to attitudes, emotions, and moods. Attitudes are feelings, at least in this class, they're under this category because attitudes imply that you feel a certain way about something or someone, about some object. An attitude is a favorable or unfavorable feeling towards people, objects, events, or ideas, right? Attitudes implies you feel a certain way, like a negative view of politicians. I have a very negative view of politicians, okay? They'll say whatever they need to say to stay elected, to get into office, to stay in office. As you guys might have been noticing recently, right? How they twist reality and will support someone, right? Because that person is popular and they want that person's people to support them too, right? That's one example of an attitude. There's a whole bunch of other examples. I would usually ask you guys for your own examples, but it could be something simple like I like ice cream. That's also an attitude. Or, prefer brunettes. That's an attitude, right? Or, I like to exercise. I like to play basketball, right? Or, I hate, let's say, watching movies. I'm not saying I do, but that would be an attitude as well. The movies that I dislike the most, actually, I don't dislike watching movies. There's certain movies I don't like very much. I hate movies that are about making movies, okay? Sometimes this is when art imitates art. When they make a movie about how to make a movie. Or they make a movie about how to like put on a play. It's like, oh, I hate that. Just make a movie and tell us a good story. Don't make a movie about a process. I don't like that sort of thing. Like that movie Birdman. It was a movie about someone who's acting and making a movie or something like that, or putting on a show. I hated that. I can't stand that, right? But that's an attitude that I have. And you might not share the attitude. Maybe you like that kind of stuff. I don't, okay? But we all have our attitudes, right? We all feel a certain way about people, about things, about ideas, about certain events, right? And you can see how much we can disagree on things, right? Especially if we're talking about things that are political. We're a very divided country. There's also emotions. Emotions are different than attitudes. Emotions are feelings that involve physiological arousal and cognitions. If you know about the one theory of emotion, right? The most important, the most widely accepted theory of emotion, it says that emotions have a physical component, the physical reaction within the body, and a cognitive label, your thought about what is happening, okay? So emotions involve those two things, physiological arousal and cognitions. And emotions are intense, they're focused, and usually more complex than attitudes. An example would be fear. Fear has a physiological component, right? Increased heart rate, breathing rate, etc. And then there is the thought, I'm going to die. I'm going to get hurt, right? Those two things combine to give us fear, according to the James Lange theory of emotion, okay? The anger is the same way, right? It's similar. Anger will also raise your heart rate, your breathing rate, your adrenaline. But then the thought is different. The thought is, I'm going to hurt this person. I'm going to kill this person, right? That's anger. Same, similar physiological arousal, but different thought that accompanies it. You know, joy would be, similar as well. Increased heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, right? But then a thought is, this is wonderful. I really enjoy this, or whatever it is, you know? So the point is that emotions can have similar biological reactions, but different cognitions, different thoughts that come up. And the two combined gives you the emotion. The emotions are actually more complex than attitudes for that reason. Attitudes are usually thoughts, okay? With some feeling, but emotions are more complex. Emotions are more focused. There's something you're afraid of, or someone you're mad at, or something that gives you joy, okay? And then there's also moods. Moods are different. Moods are longer lasting. They last longer than emotions, and they're less focused. Emotions usually have a focus. Someone you're angry at, someone you're afraid of, right? Moods are more general, okay? Like you might have a bad mood that lasts all day. You're in a bad mood. Let's say, it doesn't mean you're angry, but you're in this lousy mood, and it seems to make everything feel worse. But it's not about one specific thing, okay? Those are moods. Or maybe you're in a good mood, okay? And guess what? Your feelings are affected by your genetics, okay? Your biological makeup, your genetics, right, affect your feelings. Because, people from different societies, different cultures actually agree on what someone looks like when they're happy. They agree on facial expressions of fear, anger, disgust. Everyone can recognize those feelings. It doesn't matter what culture we're talking about, whether we're talking about some, some tribal culture in Africa, or some Latin American country, or in Alaska, or even if we're talking about someone who lives in the big city, right? In Silicon Valley, they all agree on what someone looks like when they are happy, when they're fearful, when they're angry. You show them pictures of these things, they can all point them out. This one's happy, this one's fearful, this one's angry. We can all do that. Suggests that basically we all have the same facial expressions for emotions, okay? Which means it's genetic. That's just the way we're programmed, the way our bodies respond when we feel those things. Children that are born deaf, blind, and brain damage also will smile. They'll laugh. They'll show anger, surprise. They'll show some of the same emotions, which means that it's biological. It's genetic. These emotions, these basic emotions. However, emotions are also, or feelings, to keep it more general, are also affected by culture, affected by our environment, by our learning. Our basic emotions may be genetic, biological, but the way we express them and where we express them, that is learned. Culture does contribute to feelings. People in different cultures learn different rules about expressing these emotions when it's appropriate, or if it's appropriate at all. Like the Utku Eskimos, for instance, rarely express anger. They don't show anger. It's not considered culturally appropriate. I will tell you in general, Asian people, in general, according to what I've read about their culture from research, Asian people don't find it very appropriate to show anger in public, but they will show anger privately in the home. Okay, but not in public. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to not show strong emotions in public, especially anger. I can't even pronounce that. The Ali Bedouins, right, quickly express their anger. For another tribal group, right? They have a different culture. They quickly express their anger. In general, I can tell you, okay, Asian people don't express anger so much publicly, right? It's not considered acceptable. Americans, on the other hand, oh boy, right? It's like we don't like something, we're going to speak our mind. We'll get angry. We'll voice our objections. That's the way we are. That's part of freedom, right? Or, you can say whatever you want, be as pissed off as you want. You can't do whatever you want, but it's a very different culture, right? And you can see what it does to us, right? We're fighting all the time, arguing all the time. It's part of American culture. It's part of the way democracy works. It's messy, as you guys may have heard. All right, let's keep going. I wish I could get you guys to contribute, but I'm recording. There was a study that was done about facial feedback and feelings, that your feelings are actually affected by the expressions that your face actually makes. Facial movements will influence your feelings. The facial movements you make will influence how you feel. A study done by Strack, Martin, and Stepper in 1988, right, showed that yes, your facial movements will influence your feelings. They had students read cartoons. Back in the day, they had these things called comics, like in the comic books and stuff like that, or comics in the newspaper. I know who buys newspapers nowadays, but they read these funny cartoons, these funny depictions, these funny stories, basically. They all did that. They all read these funny stories, and participants, some of them were holding a pen with their teeth, just like with the image A right there, when they were reading these funny stories, these funny cartoons. Others held the pen with their lips, like image B is illustrating there, when they read these funny cartoons. Who do you think found the cartoons funny on average, and why? Obviously, you can't tell me, but I will tell you. Group A, that held the pen with their teeth, found the cartoons funnier. Why might this be? One possibility is that when you hold a pen with your teeth like that, if you look at it, it looks like you're smiling. It looks like you're laughing. That activates the muscles that you use for smiling and laughing. And that sends signals to your brain telling you, hey, this is funny. You must be happy. And so your brain basically then thinks, oh, well, it must be funny. Okay, it influences how you feel. The movements of your face will influence how you feel and the way the brain interprets things. Self-perception theory is a different explanation that says that basically people infer things about themselves based on their behavior. You're making the movements with your mouth like you're smiling, like you're laughing. So therefore, hey, I must be happy. I must find this funny. Activation of the muscle used for smiling tells participants they must be happy, and therefore they judge the cartoons funnier. I do want to point out that those that are holding it like, with their lips, like B, that is kind of like the opposite. When you make that expression, it's like, oh, something's wrong. It's like saying, oh, when you say, oh, it's like that. Like, no, this isn't funny. This isn't right. This isn't good. So that will influence you in the other direction, finding it less funny. More about this, another study done by Stepper and Strack in 1993 found that participants, well, here's the thing. This is one study, there's a part where there's multiple studies, but participants were told to sit upright or in a slouch position in their chair, right? Sit upright, right? At the edge of your seat, straight, right? Or another group of people were told, go ahead and just relax, slouch on the chair and just lean back and slouch. Hands down, right, slouch, right? Participants then performed a task and were given positive feedback. They did something, they solved some problem, and then they were told they did a good job. It turns out that those that sat in the upright position and received positive feedback reported greater feelings of pride. Those that sat in the upright position and they were told good things about how they did, they felt better about themselves than those who sat in a slouch position. Because when you sit in the upright position, you're acting as if you're excited, you're happy. Things are positive, things are good. And when you receive that positive feedback, it affects you more, you feel better. If you sit in a slouch position, it's like, I don't like this, I'm bored, this blows, that kind of stuff, right? And when you receive positive feedback, it's like, that kind of stuff. Your body, the posture of your body, not just the movements of your face, but also the posture of your body also affects how you feel. Other studies that have to do with bodily feedback and feelings, other studies have demonstrated that positive attitudes and feelings are influenced by the activity of the flexor muscle. So if you look at your arms, right, if you flex your muscle, right, it's like you're moving something toward you, right? You're pulling toward you will also make you feel more positive. Nodding your head, right, will make you feel more positive towards something. Negative feelings, negative attitudes, negative feelings will be affected by the activity of the extensor muscle. If you extend your muscles, extend your arms, it's like you push something away, you shake your head, that will make you feel more negative, more positive. That affects how you feel beyond what the thing is. So maybe next time you want to ask somebody for a favor, tell them, hey, do me a favor. Start nodding your head before I ask you this. And that will affect them, okay, how they feel. They're more likely to agree. Sometimes, of course, you can tell how people feel by their body movements. And we'll talk about that later. But when somebody is basically, like shaking their head, but saying yes, they're being dishonest. Their body's telling you one thing, but their answer is something else, right? But what this means is that certain things have to do with feeling positive. And when we do those things, it increases feelings of positivity. And there are certain things that have to do with feeling negative. When we do those things, it increases the feelings of negativity. Not just the actual thing, but the actual way that our body behaves. Appraisal and feelings. Feelings are also influenced by how we appraise the situation, how we evaluate the situation, what we think of the situation. So here's the thing. Medved, Maddie, and Galovich in 1995 did a study. They wanted to find out who was happier after the Olympics. Were silver medalists happier? Bronze medalists happier? Who was happier and why? Now, if we were in class doing this face-to-face, I would ask you, right? But this is what they found. They found that the actual silver medalists were actually less happy than bronze medalists. All right, before we talk about this, so what happened is that those that won the bronze were happier than those that won the silver. How can that be? Bronze is third place, silver is second place. You would think that those that won the silver would be happier, but they were not. What they found is that silver medalists talked about how close they came to gold. They got second place. What they thought of was, oh my God, I could have won. I could have gotten gold. I came in second. So they were less happy. Those that got the bronze, what they imagined was winning no medal at all. It's like, wow, I got the bronze, I got something, right? Like I almost didn't medal, right? They were happier. They didn't compare themselves to gold because they weren't close to gold. They were closer to getting nothing. So they were actually happy that they got a medal in the first place. That illustrates the power of counterfactual thinking, right? Imagining the alternative version of the actual event. The alternative to winning silver is you could have gotten gold. The alternative to bronze is, hey, you could have gotten nothing at all. That's what they found. So how happy you are depends on, basically what is the alternative version of the reality? What is the alternative thing that could have happened to you? Or who are you comparing yourself with? We'll talk about those things later on. Who you compare yourself with greatly affects how you feel about yourself. And we'll talk about that. It could go both ways. Okay. And this is just to tell you a story about this. And this reminds me of, some time ago. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was more than 10 years ago. It might have been 20 years ago. I don't know, but I don't remember exactly. But there was this Russian wrestler that had never been defeated. He was undefeated, never been defeated, in competition, in practice or anything. He was the best in the world. And then the Olympics came. He was expected to win the gold because he had never been defeated. And what actually happened is he ended up losing to the American wrestler, someone who people didn't even know about. He wasn't famous. He wasn't the best. And he ended up winning the gold. He ended up beating the Russian. And that was the first time that the Russian had ever been defeated. Okay. The Russian got silver. That's good. He got second place. But you should have seen how pissed off he was, how mad he was when he stood there for the national anthem. And after the national anthem played, the Russian national anthem, after all the national anthems played, okay, and he walked off the stage, he took the medal off his neck and he slammed it into the ground. He was mad because the alternative for him is he should have gotten gold. He was especially expected to win gold. He was the best. He had never lost. And the time when it counted most is when he lost. Kind of choked under pressure, probably. There's all kinds of people like that, by the way, who are the best and are really good. They're just the best in the world. They break records. And then when it comes to the Olympics, they can't even medal because they can't perform under that great pressure for some reason. It happens. But how you feel is going to be affected by the alternative reality that you imagine. Okay. The next part is about the self. But we're about halfway. So I'll stop there so we can have a little bit of discussion. And actually, it didn't even take us that much time. But this is usually where I'll stop. So I'll stop recording.